"2023 was a special year on the Isle of Man, as the island's heritage railways celebrated some notable anniversaries. It was the 150th anniversary of the island's steam railway and the 130th anniversary of the island's unique electric railway. And Isle of Man Railways staged a spectacular festival which celebrated these vintage systems, as well as the island's world-famous horse trams, mountain railway, and the smaller railways at Groudle Glen and the Great Laxey Mine Railway. It all started on Saturday the 1st of July at Douglas Steam Railway Station, exactly 150 years to the day that the first steam loco pulled out of the station on its way to Peel. The Douglas Town Band was playing, and the platform was crowded with official guests and interested onlookers.
Is that the whole of the Heritage Railway, in fact, is a significant part.
There were speeches from the Minister for Infrastructure, the Honourable Chris Thomas, and from the island's Lieutenant Governor, Sir John Lorimer, who officially opened the celebrations and unveiled the commemorative plaque.
By Boogle High School, I say I'm absolutely delighted to unveil the plaque which officially commemorates the 150th anniversary of the Isle of Man Steam Railway. Here we go.
In 1873, there were 3 locos steamed up for the opening of the Douglas to Peel line. Today, on the platform, there are 4, all sporting headboards honouring historical figures associated with the railway. The Earl of Derby on the loco Maitland, Sir John Pender on Chiswick, the Duke of Sutherland on Loch, and the Manx Northerner on Caledonia. The Loch and Caledonia, which incidentally is the oldest steam locomotive still in service on the island, provided a spectacular start to the festivities, as coupled together they formed a double-header, pulling the carriages laden with the dignitaries the full length of the line to Port Erin. At Port Erin, a Victorian fair was in full swing. Russian Silver Band was playing, and the community had really come together to celebrate. The platform hosted a long line of stalls. There was a model train set based on Thomas the Tank and the Isle of Soda. Vintage cars, a Rover P2, a Morris Cowley, and an Essex Super 6, and Cookie the Clown. A constant backdrop was the movement of the locos, and a special enhanced timetable was in operation. 2,500 people travelled on the steam railway that day alone. However, the planning for this year of railways had started long before the sunshine of July. It began way back on a wet, dark January morning in Ramsey. The festival's organisers had wanted to be able to put a steam locomotive on the Manx Electric Railway's tracks and run it from Ramsey south to Laxey in what would have been a real novelty. So it was crucial to test the track to see if a steam loco could manage the many curves that would be encountered. And so, on this morning, the Heritage Railway volunteers had sponsored a trial run using the chassis of number 9 Douglas pushed by car 34, the diesel-powered Maria. The chassis was delivered to Ramsey Station early in the morning on an articulated low loader and carefully lowered onto the seaside track using a special rail adapter to ensure a perfect alignment. As with all secret operations on the railways, avid enthusiasts have an instinct to turn up, whatever the time or the weather, to photograph these rare events. At Walpole Avenue, close observations were made of the pony truck to see how it reacted to one of the curves, which had a check rail on it. It was important to be sure that the flange on the wheels didn't ride up and over the rail head, causing a derailment. There was a lot of close examining. It passed the test here, but at the Balleur crossing, just before the viaduct, the crew in charge of the movement suspected the pony truck had lifted out of the check rail, and this proved to be the case. However, the team decided to press on and continue south to see how the chassis reacted further down the track. The crew in the Wickham was the observation team, keeping a close lookout for any problems and, frankly, enjoying zipping up and down the track, making as much noise as possible. At Cornay, there were more problems. If the gap between the check rail and the running rail is narrower than the width of the wheel's flange, then it causes the wheel to ride up and derail. The test was showing that there was a danger of this happening, and the possibility of a consequent derailment meant, sadly, that the idea had to be abandoned, and the chassis was towed back to Ramsey. The festival proper started on Sunday the 23rd of July with some rare summer rain. Isle of Man Railway's number 8, Fenella, was hauled to Peel and was on display for part of the day in recognition of the Douglas to Peel line opening 150 years previously and running for some 95 years. Meanwhile, a few miles down the road, an inspection was taking place. The island's Lieutenant Governor was inspecting members of the Home Guard outside the Knockalo Visitor Centre. Knockalo was the site of a First World War internment camp, and during that period, the Manx Northern Railway's loco Caledonia was used to transport food and fuel from the boats in Peel Harbour to the camp for more than 23,000 internees and some 2,000 guards. To mark this service, Caledonia was placed on a static display at the entrance to where the camp once stood. A short speech was made by His Excellency, and despite the weather, there was time for photographs. That evening, there was a very special event at Port Erin. The Fenella had been taken to Douglas after her appearance in Peel and then travelled to Port Erin. For over 2 hours, a lineup of 4 Bear Peacock locos moved around the station, creating some rare photographic opportunities. It was the most engines that have ever been seen in Port Erin at one time, and included the beautifully cosmetically restored loco number 5 Mona, which was built for the opening of the Douglas to Port Erin line in 1874. This was the first time the engine had been seen in good order since the 1970s. There was also a brief appearance of a 1921 Fowler Road roller, which still belongs to the Isle of Man government and was formerly the Highway Board's road roller. Day 2 got off to a fine start with promising sunshine and lots of transport delights in the offing. Earlier in the morning, at the Manx electric car sheds at Derby Castle, the trams were being oiled and cleaned for the day's events, and one of the star attractions was being prepared for its appearance later. Events started, as they did most mornings, with a parallel run from Derby Castle to Groudle. On this morning, crossbench cars 14 and 16 were chosen to start proceedings. These cars were built for the opening of the Laxey to Ramsey extension in 1898, and although dating from the same year, there are subtle differences between them. Car 14 uses the ratchet brake system and is now the only hand-braked car in service. Car 16 is operated on air brakes, which, along with new bogies, were fitted in 1903 as part of a modernisation programme undertaken throughout the MER. It's known as a paddle box car due to the shape of its running boards, which had to be raised to clear the axle boxes when those new bogies were fitted. Perhaps the most unusual item on the tracks on day 2 was tramcar 34, named Maria, a 1995 replica of a car originally built in the mid-1890s. Numbered 7, it was used on the Snaefell Mountain Railway to carry coal up to the line's power station, positioned at the halfway point just below the mountain road. The car is electric, but that electricity comes from an onboard Atlanta diesel generator. And on day 2 of the festival, Maria, hauling trailer 49, was providing a shuttle service for enthusiasts from Laxey Station to Doon Quarry. The tramcar is driven in an identical manner to all other MER trams, with the same type of controller unit, air brakes and a manually operated ratchet brake for emergency use. Warning signals are sounded using a distinct horn. Air for the brakes is generated below the cab and stored in a tank, and each end has a driving cab distinctly higher than other MER rolling stock cabs, giving the driver an elevated seating position. At the Doon, Maria uncouples from the trailer. Earlier in the day, there had been a wall collapse onto the track near Bulgham after several days of rain, and this had resulted in single track working for a short period. Because of this, at the Doon, trams were forced onto the seaside track, and those watching were treated to an unusual shunting procedure as a result, including freewheeling the trailer down the track. With the points reset and the car recoupled to the trailer, the passengers were able to board for the return journey. Next day, Maria was out again, only this time she was working even harder and could be seen pulling 2 trailers, numbers 54 and 60, both of them packed. As she approached Laxey Station, she was met by car 16, pulling trailer 51, leaving Laxey for the journey north, a typically busy moment. On this day, Maria was working between Douglas and Ramsey, and on one of the return journeys, the car's engine had overheated, working as it was to pull 2 full trailers. It was decided that the simple act of tying open the doors to increase the airflow over the generator would solve the problem, which it did, and this is how she arrived at Derby Castle. Meanwhile, back at Laxey, there was still plenty of activity. Car 16 with trailer 42 was leaving for Douglas, as Snaefell Car 1 was leaving for the summit. It wasn't long before another of the star attractions of the day arrived in the station. Car 14 pulling mail van 4, dating from 1894. The pair were on their way from Douglas to Ramsey, and the Ramsey Philatelic Services were joining them for the journey. Van 4 is one of 2 covered 4-wheel vans built by Milnes of Birkenhead. It was originally built to carry all manner of goods and freight, but the 4-wheel vans are more commonly associated with the carriage of bagged mail for the post office, a service which came to an end in 1975. Since then, use of the vans has been infrequent, but this van was fully restored for the MER's centenary in 1993. For day 3, the focus was at the steam railway station, where there was to be a double header day, and 2 of the railway's legendary drivers were to be remembered. As a backdrop, bags of coal were loaded ready to be pushed by the simplex locomotive up to the coal platform. Maitland arrived with a formation of 7 coaches being banked by lock. All the trains leaving Douglas were double-headed, and all the ones returning from Port Erin were banked. Driver Jack Lowney was a Peel driver and worked out of Peel on number 6 Peveril for many years. Descendants of Jack were visiting from the UK, especially for the festival. Jack Petrie drove during the government years and later worked as Ballasalla station master. He's particularly remembered for his marvellous floral displays in the station throughout the season. Whilst everyone was waiting for the doubleheader to leave, the diesel shunting locomotive Ailsa sneaked past. It was purchased for Isle of Man Railways and was renamed after the Marquis of Ailsa, who heroically put together a scheme to save the steam railway in 1967 after it had run into financial trouble. The doubleheader finally leaves and provides a magnificent sight as it makes its way through the Manx countryside. The evening steam event on day 3 was a freight train-inspired photography session featuring number 4, Loch, which was standing in for Caledonia, which unfortunately was out of service on this day. Loch was lined up to pull Foxdale coach F39, the H-wagon and the goods van G1, which happens to be the only piece of 1873 rolling stock still in serviceable condition today. The train left Douglas for Oak Hill, where there was ample opportunity for photographs for the many enthusiasts. Transported by one of the current-day fleet of Mercedes Citaro buses, there was another stop at Kerristal, and finally on to Port Sodric. Elsewhere during that day there had been ample opportunity to admire the immaculate fleet of horse trams down on Douglas Promenade. One of the horses was having a warm-up run before starting the day's shift, and today was a day of toast racks. The star attraction is car 42, dating from 1905 and rebuilt in 2018. It seats up to 40 passengers and is just one of the current fleet of 13 cars. This remarkable tramway has been running since 1876, and apart from a few years during World War II and a short period during the recent promenade refurbishment, it has run every year for 148 years, making it the world's last remaining original horse-drawn passenger tramway. Over those years, the tramway amassed a total of 50 cars, a mixture of the iconic toast racks, open and roofed, saloons, double-deckers and umbrella cars. But whatever the car, as long as there's a horse to pull it, the public want to be on them. Day 4 started, as did most days during the festival, with a parallel run from Derby Castle to Groudle on the MER. This morning it was cars 20 and 5. Car 20 is one of the winter saloons and dates from 1899. Car 5 is known as a tunnel car on account of its long, sleek exterior and dates from 1894, the first year that the tramway operated from Derby Castle all the way to Laxey. Meanwhile, back at Derby Castle, a special horse tram is being readied for the trip down the Prom. The only serviceable double-decker, a car that's always a popular draw. This car, 18, was built in 1883 as a single-decker and converted to a double-deck in 1989, as by that time all the original double-decked cars had been scrapped or sold. There had been 13 in all. At the steam railway, the saloon coaches, which were built in 1905, hadn't been used for ordinary passenger service since the introduction of the dining car in 2013, which is what they're now used for. On this day, the opportunity was taken to use the coaches for passenger service as part of the festival. One of the coaches has been painted into the historic Purple Lake livery, and eventually the whole rake will be painted in this scheme, with the former torpedo air vents reinstated as part of the refurbishment. Day 5 of the festival had some really unusual items to enjoy, and the fact that they were in great demand was obvious from the start, as a huge queue had formed at the Douglas Steam Railway Station for what was billed as a legendary boat train. This was something of an historic reenactment, and recalled those halcyon days of the Manx tourist industry when steam packet boats would arrive in Douglas with hordes of people, hundreds of whom wanted to travel south to Port St Mary and Port Erin. On this day there were to be 2 departures from Douglas, one a double header and the other with a leading and a banking loco. On this first departure there were 330 passengers on the one train. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 coaches in all. Past Kerristal and on past Kroger, where there's a marvellous privately owned 7¼ gauge miniature railway that goes around the estate. It's operated by volunteers for charity events throughout the year. The train is quite a sight coming through Santon Station. Beyond Santon there's a long curve, and it's here you can see just what a magnificent train it is. Coming out of Castletown Station, you can see that the train is made up of the dining saloons and some standard compartmental coaches. Finally, the legendary boat train reenactment pulls into Port Erin's station, and in earlier times we'd have seen happy tourists with their luggage piling out of the carriages, eagerly anticipating their seaside holiday. In Laxey, the transport was a little less glamorous but interesting nevertheless. It was the day when the Wickham cars were on display, and there was the chance for just £3 to actually take a trip on one. Wickham Railcar 7442 was built in 1956 by the Wickham Company of Ware. It was purchased second-hand from the Lochaber Narrow Gauge Railway and renumbered as 22, and is usually exclusively reserved for permanent way duties. Two other Wickhams were on show at Laxey, both with the acronym NATS on their side. This stands for the National Air Traffic Services, and these cars are used by them to give access to the vital aerial equipment on Snaefell Summit at times when the mountain railway isn't running. On this fifth day of the festival, there was an unannounced and surprise appearance, which created quite an amount of interest. It was Freight Trailer 26, a piece of rolling stock that had been mechanically and cosmetically restored by a volunteer group in time for the festival. It was originally built as car number 10 in 1895, but after only 7 years of service it was withdrawn and ended up being stored in the Laxey car shed. It was converted into a freight trailer number 26 in 1918. By the 1930s there'd been a decline in goods traffic and it went back into storage and was officially written off in 1944. In 1978 it was bought by the Isle of Man Railway Society, and after being stored in various locations it was finally brought back into operational condition and made its surprise appearance at the festival. Enthusiasts followed it along the line, but those waiting for it to come out of Laxey Station and on to Ramsey had to be very patient. For some reason it stayed in Laxey for over an hour, though there were lots of other movements to keep people interested. Cars were up and down on the Snaefell line, and car 7 with trailer 48 passed by as well. At last, patience was rewarded, and car 6 with freight trailer 26 made their way past to Ramsey. The two main events on day 6 of the festival were the grand horse tram cavalcade and a rare opportunity to ride on a goods train consisting of loco number 4 Lock hauling coaches F15 and F18 with the recently refurbished closed van G1, and along with them was the replica H1 3-plank wagon and M78, a 2-plank wagon dating from 1925 and rebuilt in 1998. These 2- and 3-planked wagons were common on the island steam railways, and there were eventually 78 of the 2-plank type. They'd been intended solely as ballast wagons, but their ease of loading and unloading made them useful for many types of goods traffic. Meanwhile, on Douglas Promenade, the real horsepower was getting ready for the spectacular Douglas Bay Horse Tramway Cavalcade, a sight you can't see anywhere else in the world. The trammers were all decked out with their ribbon manes and were paraded to the front of the tram shed for a photo shoot. And then they were hitched to their respective trams, all of which were packed with people wanting to experience this unique occasion. First to leave was car 42, an open toast rack dating from 1905. Car 18, the ever-popular double-decker, was next to leave. One of the closed saloons, number 29, was next. Dating from 1892, these were often seen on those rainy summer days when tourists were out and about with their pack-a-macs. All along the promenade, the sides were lined with people taking advantage of the photo opportunities. Another open toast rack, car 21, was also full. Dating from 1890, it was rebuilt in 2019. Sadly, the horse tramway now only goes as far as Broadway, covering barely a half of its original length. And despite the many promises that it will be restored to its original destination, the sea terminal, none of these promises have been kept, and it still remains to be seen whether the world's oldest horse tramway, which celebrates its 150th anniversary in 2026, will ever be restored to its original glory. Throughout the festival, there was the opportunity to see a very unusual sight. Trailer 19, dating from 1894, now restored to its original form with curtains. It had been out of service for many years, but in 2019 it was restored by MER staff and volunteers, and it's being used during the festival for the first time in 52 years. When this car and the 5 others that came with it were delivered to the railway, they all had these canvas side curtains, which meant they could be used year-round if you didn't mind drawing the curtains in the bad weather. During the festival week, there were many opportunities to experience other aspects of the island's heritage railways. In Laxey, the restored Great Laxey Mines Railway was running, recalling the days when the steam engines Ant and Bee ran from the mines' washing floors up the valley and deep into the Laxey lead mines to bring the ore back for crushing and sorting. Just north of Douglas, another restored Victorian railway was in action, the Groudle Glen Railway. Like the Mines Railway, it's run by volunteers. The Groudle Railway has a variety of locos, steam, diesel and battery, with passenger coaches and freight stock. During the festival, there was an opportunity to see a rare and colourful lineup of all the locos. The big event on day 7 was the Manx Electric Railway and Snaefell Mountain Railway cavalcade. It did get off to a bit of a wet start though. In fact, a sudden deluge of rain sent everyone running for cover, but it didn't dampen spirits. 14 cars, 13 trailers, 2 vans and a wagon were to parade through Laxey Station towards Douglas. First to enter was, of course, Car 1, dating from the first year of the railway, 1893, and the oldest operational electric tramcar in the world, still running on its original line. It was pulling trailer 49, the first trailer to be built for the railway and also dating from 1893. After they were parked on a siding, sister car 2, pulling trailer 51, entered the station, both also dating from that first year.
As you get going over the years, the trolley poles on the roofs actually submit quite an amount of down pressure on the roofs of the station. So this is Snaefell Carling 4.
Car 16 and trailer 59 were of particular interest. The trailer is perhaps the most unusual item of passenger stock on the MER. It was built in 1895 for use by the tramway directors and their guests, and consequently had a much higher standard of comfort with upholstered velvet seating. However, it's been known as the Royal Trailer ever since 1902, when King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra paid a post-coronation visit to the island and travelled in the car from Douglas to Ramsey. Car 32 with sister car 33 are the newest and most powerful trams on the MER, though they are actually 112 years old. Car 32 was built in 1906, as was trailer 62, and they've traditionally been paired together ever since. Towards the end of the cavalcade, we saw car 33 with trailer 52. They've been used for some years by the Wire team. The trailer was originally built for the opening of the railway, and each winter the roof and seats were removed and it was used for works duties. Sometime in the 1950s, the seats weren't replaced, and since then it's been permanently on works duties. It's now used by the Wire team and is fitted with a scissor lift to access the overhead wires and a frame to carry drums of that wire. Day 8, the final day of Festival Week, saw another unusual horse tram event, the double-decker tram being pulled by 2 horses. It's always a bit of a challenge to back 2 horses onto the car. And then there's the matter of sorting out the straps and connecting them to the special double drawbeam. But soon everything was ready. You might think that 2 horses would always be required to pull a full double-decker. But even from the earliest years of the tramway, 1 horse usually did the job. There was some public criticism about this, and in the 1940s, the Manx Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals complained that a single horse shouldn't have to restart a double-decker into the high winds sometimes experienced on the promenade. But usually they managed. Nowadays, there are just 7 tram horses running the service, though there are others in training. In earlier years, though, things were very different. In 1934, for example, the tramway carried 2,471,542 passengers, and there was a stud of 135 horses housed in 4 different stables, and each year they needed 2,000 sacks of oats, 185 tons of hay, 68 tons of straw, and 14 tons of bran. There was plenty of manure on the promenade for those who cared to collect it. The final night of Festival Week concluded with a steam extravaganza at Douglas Railway Station to mark the 150th anniversary, and it showcased all the available locomotives. It was the final test for the enthusiasts, many of whom were visiting the island specifically for the festival, because the weather decided to rain on this particular parade. However, it was still a remarkable sight. All the available locomotives, all 6 of them, on display in the station, including a selection of goods stock as well. And that concluded the main festival for 2023, but it wasn't the final event of the year. That took place some weeks later on the 10th of September in Laxey Station. It was, almost to the day, 130 years since the Manx Electric Railway line opened. A remarkable birthday to be celebrating. Ramsey Town Band was there to set the scene, and the 2 oldest cars on the line arrived in parallel, carrying all the distinguished guests. His Excellency the Lieutenant Governor, Sir John Lorimer, was driving, and the island's Chief Minister, the Honourable Alfred Cannon, was also in attendance. As you'd expect, there was a plaque to unveil. One of those plaques that, in years to come, when the celebrations themselves are forgotten, will remind people of the remarkable milestones that this railway has seen. The Chief Minister spoke of the many staff and volunteers who have made and continue to make this railway such an outstanding part of the island's identity.
Now, hundreds of dedicated Manx Electric Railway employees have given dedicated service and imparted their skills from generation to generation. The volunteers and the ever-passionate enthusiasts who have helped and supported the Manx Electric Railway must always be recognised and should be recognised for their continued efforts to teach and guide our customers.
The Governor spoke of the long involvement of the island community in the running of the railway.
And what I love is the fact that it's such a family part of the community. We've got grandfathers and grandsons involved, and it's so much part of the island's DNA. So it therefore gives me great pleasure to be part of the 130th anniversary of the Manx Electric Railway, and to officially open the Victorian Fair, which I did, and now to unveil the plaque, unveiling it very carefully because it's precipitously sitting on the easel, to unveil the plaque to commemorate this historic celebration.
With the ceremony complete, this brought to an end the day's celebration and indeed a remarkable year of the railways. The Railways of the Isle of Man, a priceless collection of world heritage, unique and cherished by the thousands who come to see it and to use it every year. Let us hope there will be many more birthdays to celebrate in the future.